So, Alice, thanks so much for chatting with me today. It's a huge, huge honor. You're so talented, and this is
Oh
a
my gosh, thank
terrific
you.
film. So, congratulations.
Thank you so
Uh,
much. That means a lot to me.
no, it's all true. Your second film after Saving Face, and I love this because it's kind of a high school retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac, but instead of a man with a really big nose helping another man to woo a beautiful woman, you have a Chinese American lesbian helping a popular jock to woo a popular girl. So I guess my first question is, what made you want to tell this kind of love story in this context of small town American high school?
Yeah. You know, I there are like a couple of things come to mind. One is I do think like I didn't set out to make a teen movie, right? Like, but at a certain point I realized that setting it in high school was the right setting for this sort of film, partly because I do actually think that we all pretty much regress to being teenagers when it comes to love, right? Like, God knows I still get, I'm like, oh my God, should I text? What should I do? You know, like ridiculous things still come to my head. And I realize this is probably going to be how it is until I die. And secondly, I feel like high school has this really great way of, I mean, I don't know what your experience is, but mine of as I get older, I feel like the world kind of conspires to narrow down the types of people you interact with, right? Like, do you go to college?
Sure.
What kind of college do you go to? What do you do after college? Like, pretty soon, it feels like this. You can it's like queer people of this economic level, and like it just gets narrower and narrower. And the great thing about at least the high school I went to, and I think most high schools, is that you can have a lot of different people from different sort of villages, if you were, different economic socio bubbles, who generally wouldn't cross. But because they're in such a tiny geographical area, sometimes they collide. And I think in this case, I'm taking the classic Cyrano story, but I'm really, because I'm populating it with characters that each have a very specific, like there are notions of race, there's notions of being an immigrant, there's notions of class
Yes.
that are all in play here. Technically, these three characters are all in bubbles that don't touch, but they do collide. And that collision ends up sort of helping all three of them sort of change their connection, changes each of their lives, right? And I think there's something, especially because it's high school and it's like these characters are still trying to form themselves, that when their lives change, we feel like, wow, like this is like the beginning of like what their life will become. So that's the first thought. The second thought is why a small rural town, which I think you asked.
Yeah.
Um, I wrote this when Trump had just been elected,
Okay.
and because initially, like if you look at the hook of the story, this could easily be in like a big high school in Orange County, in
Sure.
like
Sure.
all white, very like fun, broad comedy, like a Bring It On, right? And that'd be a
Yeah.
great movie. That's just not the movie I wanted to make. Like I
Sure.
wanted to make something where I want to show, like especially at that particular point, I remembered thinking, like it's not like I didn't know sexism, racism, and homophobia existed. Like, of course I know it exists. In fact, I still have those attitudes, even though I'm an old Asian dyke and I work on it like all the time, right? Like, hopefully I'm much better, but sometimes a thought comes up and I'm like, what was that? Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's just part of being an American. I think we all, like, I don't think it's possible to be born in this country and not have been imbued with those attitudes. So I think we all work on it, but I just assume there are countries progressing that we all hold as a value, that it's important to work on these things. And I guess I'd sort of fallen into this idea that we as a country were progressing. And then when Trump got elected, I think that was like a little bit of a cold water splash for me, where I hadn't realized a whole sections of the country did not hold that necessarily as a value and
Sure.
did not feel like it was important to work on that. Um, and in that process, I think I write a lot sometimes to understand both myself, but also the world. And I
Of
thought, well,
course.
I want to set this in a small rural town that I don't say it's Trump country because then it would date the film, but it's a small conservative town, right? And I don't want it to be a menacing town. I want there to be sort of an affection for it. Uh,
Yes.
because in that, I thought it was a way for me to sort of understand, but also to maybe, my hope is that some kid or some adult would be watching this movie and be like, oh, that's just like the town I live in or the one I grew up in. And it might make them think about like that one immigrant family or that one POC family or that one kid who's different and coming out as, whether it's queer or trans or different in some way. And I thought it was like my best shot at like affecting the sort of cultural conversation in the country. So that's why I end up setting it there.
That's fantastic. And as someone who grew up in a small town, not all that different from Squamish, you achieved your goal. I had many thoughts watching it.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
well, thank you, and congratulations on the film. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Great. Thank you, David.
Sure.